Welcome to Prajim Technologies. I am Venkat. This is part 38 of ASP.NET video series. In this session, we'll discuss about the ASP.NET Wizard Control events. Before continuing with the session, I strongly recommend to watch parts 35, 36 and 37 of this video series. Let's flip to Visual Studio. Drag and drop the wizard control onto the web form. We know that a wizard control is a collection of wizard steps. By default, we get 3 wizard steps. Let's copy and paste this to get the third wizard step, and let's get rid of this ID property and change the step title to step 3. Let's flip to the design mode, and let's go to the properties of the wizard control by right clicking on that and select properties. And to view the list of events supported by the wizard control, click on the events icon. The first event that we'll examine today is the active step changed event. This event gets fired whenever the active step of the wizard control is changed. And to change the active step of the wizard control, you can do that by clicking on these navigation buttons, next, previous, etc., or by clicking on the sidebar buttons. To generate the event handler for this active step changed event, double click on the text box there, which will generate the event handler. Now let's say all I want to do here is to print the active step index of the wizard control. To do that, response.write, and I want to print a message saying that active step changed to. Okay, now how do I get the active step of the wizard control? Wizard1 dot, there's a property called active step index, and this is an integer property, and obviously if I want to print that, I need to convert that to string using the toString method. So now when we run this, and whenever we change the active step index of the wizard control by clicking on the navigation buttons or the sidebar buttons, that message will be printed: active step change it to 1, active step change it to 2. And remember, this is a zero based index collection. That's why when I am on step 3, it actually shows the step index is 2. When I am on step 1, it shows the step index is 0. Alright, the next event that we'll examine today is the cancel button click event. Now, by default, the wizard control will not show the cancel button. For the cancel button to be displayed, flip to the properties page, and then there is a property called display cancel button, which is false by default. Turn that to true. Okay, now this cancel button click is fired whenever somebody clicks that cancel button. Now, if somebody clicks that cancel button, and if you want to do some server-side processing, that's when you will make use of this event handler. Double click to generate the event handler, and all I want to do here is print a message saying that cancel button clicked. Okay, so when we run this and then when we click the cancel button, as you might expect, that message cancel button clicked will be fired. And remember, this cancel button is shown on every step of the wizard control. So you click that cancel button on any step, you'll have that message. Okay, now remember, if you just want to navigate away from the wizard control, maybe to another page or to an external site, then you can simply do that using a property called canceled destination page URL, the page URL where you want to go to when somebody clicks that cancel button. Okay, so if your intention is to just navigate to another page within your application or to an external site, you don't really need an event handler, a server-side event handler to do that. You can just do that using this cancel destination page URL property. Alright, so the next event that we will look at today is the next button click event handler. Before we'll talk about the finish button click in just a bit, but first let's look at next button click event. Obviously, as you might expect, this event gets fired whenever somebody clicks the next button. Okay, let's generate the event handler. And the important thing to notice here is the type of object that's coming into the event handler method: wizard navigation event arguments. Okay, this object exposes current step index and the next step index properties. Okay, so if you ever want to do some processing based on the current step index or the next step index, you can make use of this object. Okay, now let's say all I want to do is I want to print the current step index number and the next step index number whenever somebody clicks this button. So e dot current step index, and just to indicate that it is the current step index, let's put that there. And since this is an integer, we need to convert that to string, and let's put an HTML break there so that it comes in its own line. Okay, let's copy paste that and change this to next step index. Okay, and another thing to notice as far as this wizard navigation event arguments object is concerned, there is another property, a cancel property, and if you look at the IntelliSense, it's a Boolean property, meaning it expects a true or a false. Now look at what IntelliSense states here. It gets or sets a value indicating whether the navigation to the next step in the wizard should be cancelled. So if you set this property to true, then it wouldn't allow us to navigate to the next step in the wizard control. Okay, so e.cancel is equal to true. If I set that to true, I wouldn't be able to go to the next step. Let me run this and see what actually happens. So the page loads, and then when I click that, so currently I am on step 1 of the wizard control. When I click this next, look at that. Okay, current step is equal to 0, next step is equal to 1, but then I am still on step 1. Why is that? Because you have set e.cancel is equal to true, so that's not allowing you to move to the next step in the wizard control. So if for any reason you want to prevent the user from moving to the next step, maybe because he didn't fill in a required field, so you don't want to allow him to go to the next step of the wizard control unless and until you do that, and he does that, then you can make use of that property. So there are a variety of real-time scenarios where you can actually make use of that event. Okay, so let's do this programmatically. Let's say on step 1, instead of always disabling the movement to the next step, let's drag and drop a checkbox control onto the web form, and let's call this checkbox cancel, and then let's say cancel navigation is the text. So if somebody checks this checkbox, this is on step 1 of the wizard control. So if somebody checks this checkbox and then when they click the next button, they shouldn't be allowed to go to the next step. But whereas if they don't check it, then they can go to the next step. So if I want to programmatically do that, I can say if checkbox cancel.checked, if that is checked, then e.cancel is equal to true. Okay, you can either do this or you can simply say e.cancel is equal to checkbox cancel.checked, because checkbox cancel.checked returns a Boolean property. Okay, a true if it is checked, a false if it is not checked. If it is checked, we don't want to go to the next step, so e.cancel will be true in that case and will not be allowed to move to the next step. So let's go ahead and run this at this time. And then when I select cancel navigation, I click the next button. Look at that, current step index is 0, the next step index is going to be 1. But if I uncheck that and then when I click that, I am moving to the next step. Okay, so let's look at the finish button click. As you might expect, the name states this event is fired whenever somebody clicks the finish button on the final step of the wizard control. Double click to generate the event handler and look at the object, it's the same object. So on the finish button click as well, you'll have access to the current step and the next step. Okay, let's copy that and paste that there, and when I run that, and when we actually move to the final step of the wizard control, look at that, let's click the finish button once again. The current step index is 2 and the next step index is also 2 because that's the last step. We don't have any more steps. That's why current step index and the next step index are the same there. Okay, and previous button click, as you might expect, this event is fired whenever somebody clicks the previous button on the wizard control. And if I double click to generate the event handler, look at that. You again have access to the current step index and the next step index. And if you want to cancel the navigation to a previous step, you can do that using the cancel property, e.cancel. And sidebar button click. Whenever somebody clicks the sidebar buttons, any of these buttons, then this event gets fired. And again, you have the same object here and access to the same properties. Okay, so those are the different events of the wizard control. And pre-render event, this event is fired just before the wizard control is rendered. On this slide, you can find resources for ASP.NET C# and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.